My name is Kara, and this happened in December of 2008. I was 11. I'm old enough now to know how memory bends, how fear stretches seconds, how your brain patches in missing pieces. I've tried to tell myself that's all this was, but some parts of that night are still too sharp to feel invented. The power went out right after dinner. One moment the TV was murmuring in the background. The next it was like the house had been unplugged from the world. My mom slipped into calm mode. She pulled out the candles we only ever used during outages and talked through it like a plan. One for the kitchen, one for the hallway, one for the living room. My dad headed straight for the basement to check the breaker, even though we all knew the whole neighborhood was dark. That was just who he was, always trying to fix something, even when it couldn't be fixed. Outside, the storm was mean. Snow flew sideways, slamming into the windows in thick clumps that scraped off and vanished. The wind didn't howl, it shoved, like it was testing the house over and over. My mom dragged couch cushions onto the floor and called it camping. She made hot chocolate on the gas stove. I built a blanket fort under the coffee table. For a while, it was fun. That's what blackouts are for kids. Fun first, then you start listening. The house had sounds I'd never noticed. Creaks, pops, the faint tick of cooling metal. Without the TV, every noise was bigger. Somewhere far off, lightning cracked. Winter lightning doesn't roll like summer thunder. It just snaps the world into existence for a heartbeat, then slams the dark back down. The first flash showed only snow. The yard looked erased, the fence a pale suggestion. The second flash showed a person. He stood in the middle of our yard, right where my dad usually piled shoveled snow. Just a dark shape against all that white. My first thought was kid logic. It's probably someone we know. A neighbor checking on us, maybe. That idea lasted half a second. No one was out in that storm. You couldn't see 2 houses down. The weather radio kept repeating the same warning in a flat, mechanical voice. I must have made some kind of sound because my dad came over fast. "What are you doing?" he asked. "There's someone outside," I said. He stared into the storm. Without lightning, there was nothing but black and moving white. "There's nobody there," my mom said softly, stepping beside us. Then the next flash hit. The man was closer, not a little closer, a lot. Now he was near the fence line, turned slightly toward the house, still standing the same way. Not leaning into the wind, not hunched, not moving at all. I watched my dad's shoulders tighten. He didn't say a word. He just stepped back from the glass. "No more looking," my mom said quickly. She pulled the curtain shut, even though fabric doesn't stop lightning. It felt like pulling a blanket up against fear. I kept peeking anyway. I was 11. Curiosity always beat obedience by just a little. The next flash came sooner. He was closer again, near the edge of the yard where the snow drifted up against the house. His posture hadn't changed. It was like he wasn't walking between flashes, like each burst of light just updated his location. That's the detail that embedded itself. People move in a storm. They brace, stumble, fight the wind. This man might as well have been standing in a quiet room. My dad checked the locks, deadbolt, chain. He jiggled the chain until it sat just right. We moved into the hallway, away from the windows. My mom kept her voice light, but her hand never left my shoulder. My dad sat rigid in a chair, flashlight in one hand, hammer in the other, like that combination meant anything. The lightning kept coming. With the next flash, he was right against the house, standing directly beneath the living room window, close enough to touch it. That flash held just long enough for me to see more. The bulk of his shoulders, the shadow of a hood or hat, the shape of boots. Then darkness snapped back. A second later, I heard a sound that didn't belong to the storm. A soft scrape along the side of the house. It could have been sliding snow. It could have been anything. But it sounded like movement right at the foundation. No one spoke. My mom's fingers dug into my shoulder. My dad stood and moved toward the living room. Slow, careful steps like anything sudden might invite something worse. Another flash lit the hallway. I didn't look. I stared at the curtain, pretending it was the only thing keeping us together. Nothing else happened. No knock, no broken glass, just wind, snow, and our breathing. Eventually the storm eased. The lightning stopped first. My brother fell asleep. My mom dozed in the chair. My dad stayed upright, awake, staring at nothing until morning. Daylight made everything look harmless. The yard was smooth, white, clean, like the night had been erased. My dad went out alone. He walked the yard slowly, scanning. No man, no damage, no footprints leading away. Then he pointed. Deep boot prints were pressed into the snow, right up against the house, beneath the living room window. Close enough that whoever stood there could have leaned their face to the glass. My parents didn't say much about it after that. They blamed the storm. They blamed tricks of light. But my dad shoveled that patch first, before the sun could soften the snow. I grew up and stopped being afraid of storms, but I never stopped being afraid of someone standing absolutely still. I'm a mechanic. Not because I'm tough, because I like things I can see, measure, and fix. Winters up here in Precy, Maine are the same. You don't romanticize them, you prepare. That storm had been on the forecast for days. Heavy snow, high wind, the kind that empties roads and pins people indoors. I topped off the generator, stacked firewood by the door, charged my phone and backup battery, and left the shovel propped beside the wall like always. I lived alone a few minutes outside town. Quiet even on good nights. When the storm arrived, the quiet changed. Snow swallowed sound. Wind leaned on the house like it wanted in. I made coffee even though it was late, half-watched a movie. Checked the time and thought I should sleep before the power made the decision for me. That's when I heard the voice. At first I thought it was the TV. Then I remembered cable had cut out hours earlier. The TV was just hissing static. The voice came again. Please help me. It was a child's voice. I stood slowly. Your brain tries to protect you from jumping to the worst conclusion. It tells you there's a normal explanation you'll feel stupid for missing. But it was after midnight. The storm was heavy. The roads were dead. No child should have been anywhere near my porch. I edged toward the front window and leaned just far enough to see outside. The porch light gave off a weak yellow glow, barely pushing through the blowing snow. I didn't see a kid. I saw footprints. They came straight from the yard to the porch steps. Deep, clear impressions in fresh snow. Wide, heavy adult boots, long stride, thick tread. No smaller prints mixed in, no dragging trail, nothing that matched a child fighting through drifts. The voice came again. Help me, closer this time. I went to the door but didn't touch the lock. Who's there? I called. Silence stretched long enough that I wondered if I'd imagined it. Then the same voice answered, same flat tone. I'm cold. Let me in. The words were right, but the way they were said was. It sounded like someone reciting a line they'd memorized. I should have called 911 right then. I know that now. But I stood there caught between instinct and guilt. If it was a real kid, ignoring it felt wrong. If it wasn't, opening the door felt worse. I grabbed my phone and pointed the camera through the peephole. Snow blurred everything. The porch light glared back. No shape, no movement, just swirling white and the buzz of the bulb. But the boot prints were still there, clear, undeniable. The voice came again, now from the side of the porch near the living room window. Please help me. I moved to the window and looked out. Same prints, no new tracks circling the house, no sign of anything having moved. Snow doesn't miss footsteps, snow keeps records. Who's out there? I called louder. I'm cold, the voice replied, same calm delivery. I stepped back and dialed 911. The dispatcher sounded tired, stretched thin. I gave my address and said the words out loud. Child's voice, adult footprints. She told me response would be delayed because of the storm and told me not to open the door. I'm not, I said. The second I hung up, the voice came back. Help me, I stayed quiet. "Let me in," it said next. It sounded right up against the door. I pressed my back to the wall and listened. The house creaked. The wind rattled the siding. Then the voice came from the living room side of the house. "I'm cold." I went to that window and looked out. Nothing. The yard was smooth except for the single line of boot prints leading to the porch. That's when it really clicked. If the voice was moving, the tracks should be too. They weren't. I stayed up the rest of the night. Lights down, TV off, phone in my hand. The voice faded in and out, always the same lines. Sometimes by the door, sometimes by a window. At one point I whispered, "What do you want?" No answer. Minutes later again, "Help me." Somewhere before dawn, it stopped completely. The quiet that followed felt heavier than the storm. Morning came flat and gray. Snow banked against the door. I eased the curtain aside. The boot prints were gone, swallowed by new snow. But if I close my eyes, I can still see what had been there. Large adult tracks pacing back and forth like someone had waited. No small prints. No signs of somebody being carried. No clear trail away, just edges softened by wind until direction disappeared. That's what stayed with me, not the voice, not even the idea of something standing out there all night. The design of it did. A child's voice is a key. You hear it, and the decent part of you automatically reaches for the lock. I don't know what was outside my house. I just know it wanted a door opened, and it didn't care whose voice it used. After that winter, I installed a porch camera, upgraded the lights, kept my phone charged, and on nights when the road disappears under snow and the world goes hushed, I still listen. My name is Kara, and this happened in January of 2022. That night the storm started early and never backed off. Snow fell in thick, steady sheets, driven sideways by wind that rattled the siding and made the windows hum. It was Fargo's worst blizzard, but it was the kind that makes inside feel like the only sane option. I was home alone, laptop open on the kitchen counter, finishing work notes. The TV was on low in the living room, more company than entertainment. My neighborhood is compact and quiet, houses closed together, sidewalks running right beneath our front windows. From my couch, I can see the street without even leaning forward. Around 10:30 p.m., I got up to refill my water and looked out the window without thinking. That's when I saw Brent. He lived a few houses down. Polite, quiet. We exchanged waves, nothing more. The kind of neighbor who vanishes from your mind as soon as you close your door. He was walking past my place like it was a calm autumn night. No coat, no hat, no gloves, just a thin gray sweatshirt and jeans. At first I figured he'd just run out to his car for something. People do stupid things in winter, but as he drew closer, something felt wrong in a quiet, insistent way. He wasn't hunched. His hands weren't in his pockets. He wasn't moving fast. He walked with an easy, steady pace, as if the cold and wind weren't touching him at all. When he reached my front window, he turned his head and looked straight into my living room. I stepped back without meaning to. He didn't slow, didn't nod, didn't react. He just kept walking until the snow and darkness around the corner swallowed him near the streetlight. I stayed there longer than was reasonable, waiting for some part of it to make sense. It never did. I checked the time, 10:38 p.m. I went back to my laptop and tried to work, but the scene kept replaying. Mostly the way his posture never changed. Anyone else would have been bracing. He moved like it was 60 degrees out. Around 11:40, I got up again. Bathroom, more water, another automatic glance at the window. He was there again. Same clothes, still no coat. This time he walked under the streetlight on his way toward my house. Snow clung to his hair and shoulders, but if he felt it, he gave no sign. When he reached my yard, he looked in again. It felt deliberate, like checking. I slipped back into the darker part of the room. He passed without stopping, arms loose at his sides. I checked my phone. 11:41 p.m. Now it was a pattern. I locked the front door, even though it was already locked. Checked the back door. Stood in the kitchen listening to the wind and trying to talk myself down. People walk at night. Maybe he had insomnia. Maybe he was pacing after an argument. None of it felt solid, but it was better than the alternative. At 12:52, he passed again. This time, I didn't step away. I stood still by the window and watched. As he drew close, he slowed just a fraction. Then he turned his head farther than before, as if trying to see deeper into the room. It didn't feel like he was searching for me. It felt like he was confirming exactly where I was. I turned off the TV. Silence felt safer than sound. At 1:58, he came again. I shut off the living room lamp, leaving only distant spill from the kitchen, and watched from the hallway. If light was what he was checking for, maybe darkness would break the cycle. It didn't. At 2:59, he passed once more. I stood there with my phone in my hand, trying to decide who I could call without sounding ridiculous. My neighbor keeps walking past my house. Doesn't sound like an emergency. It barely sounds like anything. The last time was 3:11 a.m. I know because I checked my phone the second I saw him emerge beneath the streetlight. This time, he was closer to my house. Not fully in the yard, but nearer than before in a way that felt intentional. He slowed as he reached my window. Then he stopped. He turned his head completely toward the glass, toward the exact spot where I stood in the dark. I couldn't make out his eyes, but I could see the angle of his face, aimed with purpose. He didn't squint or shift like someone trying to pierce the darkness. He held absolutely still, like he already knew. I pressed my hand over my mouth, suddenly unsure I could trust myself not to make a sound. After a few long seconds, he turned away and walked on, disappearing into the storm the same way as every other time. That should have been a relief. It was. Because he didn't leave like someone giving up. He left like someone finishing a round. I never slept. I sat on my bed with my phone in my hand until the sky went pale and the storm settled into a dull gray blanket. By morning, Brent's car sat in his driveway, his porch light off, like any ordinary day. That afternoon, with more courage than sense, I walked down and knocked on his door. A woman answered, his girlfriend, I guessed. "Hey," I said, trying to sound casual. "I just wanted to check if Brent's okay. I saw him walking around in the storm last night." She frowned. "Brent was home all night." I waited for the laugh, the clarification. None came. "He didn't go out," she said. "We watched a movie and went to bed." I nodded like that settled it and went back to my house. Later, I checked the snow along the sidewalk. Most of it had drifted, but a few shoe prints remained near the edge of my yard. What bothered me was what wasn't there. No clean trail from his porch. No neat line of steps linking his front door to that stretch of sidewalk. Just prints that seemed to start near my house and fade into nothing. It wasn't just that he walked past my home. It was the way he did it, like a route, like a job, like clockwork. Now, whenever storms roll in and the street goes quiet, I catch myself checking the time without even thinking about it. It was January of 2016. I was the county road supervisor then. If a plow went missing, if a driver stopped answering the radio, if a route wasn't cleared on time, my phone rang. I built the schedules. I knew every road, every driver, every truck. After enough winters, you don't just recognize plows by sight. You recognize them by the way they sound. I lived far enough out that nobody passed my place without a reason. Long gravel driveway, a shed behind the house, no close neighbors, the kind of quiet where you can hear weather coming. On paper, that night's storm wasn't dramatic. No blizzard warning, just steady snow and wind, the kind that piles up slowly and blinds you in bursts. I'd stayed late at the office, watching the GPS tracker and listening to radio chatter, making sure the main routes were being hit in order. Everything looked clean. I got home after midnight, kicked off my boots and sat down with my laptop because habit is hard to break. The house creaked its usual way as the wind leaned on it. Nothing felt wrong. Then I heard it, faint at first, a deep rumble, an engine pushing against weight. I went to the front window. A snowplow rolled past my house, except it had no headlights. No beams cutting through the storm, no amber strobes, just a bulk of metal moving through darker dark. The blade was barely a shadow along the road, but the engine noise, I knew it. I'd know it anywhere. I watched it roll past my driveway and vanish into the storm. First thought, someone was being reckless. Running a plow without lights isn't just stupid, it's lethal. Second thought, why was anyone plowing this road at all? That stretch wasn't on the schedule that night. It only got attention when a storm was severe, and even then, not until after the major routes were cleared. I knew that because I'd written the plan. I went back to the table and pulled up the county tracking system. Every unit showed exactly where it was supposed to be. I refreshed. Same result. Maybe a contractor, I told myself. Some rancher with an old rig. Wyoming's full of guys who'd rather move snow than sleep. But the engine I'd heard wasn't a farm toy. I stared at the screen, waiting for a blip to show a plow swinging back past my location. Nothing. About 45 minutes later, I heard it again. Same engine, same note. I went back to the window. The plow passed my house a second time. Still no lights. It moved slower now, like the blade was riding lower. The road was already drifting over again, but I could see the darker scrape where the steel had kissed asphalt. For a second, it looked like the cab angled toward my house, as if the driver had turned to look up at my windows. I can't swear to that part. Could have been wind. Could have been my brain trying to plug fear into the picture. Either way, I didn't like it. I called the on-duty dispatcher. "Tell me you didn't send anybody down my road," I said. "No," he answered right away. "Nobody's assigned out there. I've got a plow going by with its lights off." He checked the system while I waited. "All units are accounted for. Trackers are clean. A contractor wouldn't run dark," I said, "and nobody's burning fuel to do extra passes on a dead road for fun." He radioed the drivers anyway. One by one, they answered from where they were supposed to be. Nobody reported being near my road. Nobody had seen another unit. After I hung up, I stayed at the window. The storm kept doing its work. Snow sheeted across the road like the land was trying to erase itself. I went to bed after 2, but I didn't really sleep. Every noise snapped me back awake. Around 3:30, I heard the engine again. This time, I didn't go to the front window. I went to the side window that faced the shed. The shed sat back from the road, offset so you couldn't see it unless you knew it was there. Inside, tools, salt, chains, and a snowblower with a personality problem. The plow crawled into view, that same dark outline against drifting white. Only the roar of the engine said it was there. No lights. It passed the mouth of my driveway like before, but instead of continuing straight, it slowed and drifted just enough that the cab lined up with the narrow track that ran behind my shed. Then it kept moving out of my sightline. The engine noise didn't fade like it should have if it stayed on the road. It went muffled, like something solid had come between it and me. I listened. The engine idled for a few seconds, then it cut off. Only wind. I didn't go outside. People who say they haven't done the math. Low visibility, icy ground, no backup, and something already willing to run a heavy rig with no lights. I waited for morning. When daylight came and the storm calmed, I layered up and walked to the road. Plow tracks were obvious, deep tire treads, a wide, dark scrape from the blade, no mistaking them. I followed them. They passed my driveway as before. Then, near where my shed sat back from the road, they angled off, not into my driveway, but off-road toward the space behind the shed. The snow around those tracks was untouched. That made them worse somehow, a scar across unmarked white. Behind the shed, the tracks stopped, turned, and retraced themselves back to the road. No extra curves, no wandering, straight in, straight out. It felt like someone had wordlessly said, "Look at what I could have done to this if I wanted." I combed the area for anything else, footprints, a dropped tool, a cigarette butt. There was nothing. I filed the report because that's my job. Logged the time and location, told my boss. Nobody laughed, but nobody rushed either. Storm nights scramble records. GPS signals drop. Data vanishes. You can come up with reasons for missing logs. You can't explain where a whole plow went. For the next few nights, every distant engine dragged me to a window. I refreshed the tracker system more than necessary, as if watching it hard enough could force the world to behave. Eventually, fresh snow buried the tracks. The shed looked ordinary again. That should have been the end of it. It was, because I still don't believe that plow just got lost. I think it went exactly where it meant to. And whatever it was looking at back there, it didn't need headlights to see it. Music. I was 29 and doing delivery work full-time. Long routes, late nights, whatever paid the bills. Winter runs were routine. Snowstorms didn't stop orders. People still needed groceries and prescriptions, and someone had to bring them. That night I wasn't trying to be brave. I was just trying to be careful. The storm had been crawling in all afternoon. By the last leg of my route, the snow was coming in sideways, thick enough that my headlights felt more decorative than useful. The radio kept repeating alerts about closures and low visibility. I slowed down, leaned forward, kept scanning for movement. Storms like that develop a rhythm. Once you've driven through enough of them, you can tell when something breaks it. That's why I saw the car right away. A sedan sat dead center in the road ahead. At first my brain tried to file it under normal. Someone slid and stopped. Someone stuck. But as I eased closer, I saw the driver's door was hanging wide open. Open like someone had stepped out mid-motion and never came back to shut it. No hazards, no interior light, no movement. I stopped my truck a good distance back. If I needed to turn around, I didn't want to be nose to nose with it. Snow was already packing up around my tires. I rolled the window down and yelled, "Hey." "You all right?" Only the wind answered. Hazards on, I stepped out. The cold bit straight through my jacket. Snow stung my face like little needles. My boots sank into slush gathered along the asphalt edge. The car was newer than I expected. Clean. Not the kind of thing you usually see abandoned in the middle of nowhere. I walked closer, glancing between that open door and the tree line. Inside, it was dark. No keys in the ignition, no phone on the seat, no bag on the floor. The driver's seat was pushed farther back than I'd ever keep mine. I brushed my gloved hand across the hood. Warm. Not earlier today, warm. Recently warm. That's when unease stopped being vague. If the engine had only just been shut off, the driver wasn't long gone. So where were they? I looked down. Footprints. They started at the open driver's door, crisp and deep. No shuffle, no drunken zigzag. They went straight off the road and into the trees. I followed the path with my eyes, telling myself there had to be a simple reason. Maybe they'd gone to look for help. Maybe they thought there was a house nearby, but those footprints didn't look lost. They looked like someone with a destination. I called out again, louder. "Hello, you need help?" Nothing. I took a few careful steps toward the tree line. Not committing, just trying to see past the first row of trunks. The woods were black and crowded, snow weaving through the gaps like smoke. The wind made every branch sound like movement. I reminded myself I wasn't search and rescue. I was just a delivery driver. Still, the thought pressed in. What if someone's hurt? That almost pulled me forward. Almost. Then I saw something else. A second set of footprints, not by the car, at the edge of the woods. They didn't connect to the first set. They weren't layered over them. They just appeared there, stamped into the snow as if someone had stepped out of the trees and stopped, facing the road, facing me. I didn't see anyone. Didn't hear a snap or a breath, but the exact angle of those prints made my skin tight. like whoever had made them had stepped out to watch, and then decided not to come closer. An urge to look behind me hit so hard it bypassed logic. That instinct made the choice for me. I backed up slowly, keeping my eyes on the tree line, refusing to turn my back completely. When I reached my truck, I climbed in and hit the locks hard. I sat there a minute with the heater on high, hands locked around the wheel, trying to talk myself into sounding sensible on the phone. Then I looked at the sedan again, door still open, rocking just a little in the wind, warm hood, footprints leading into the woods, footprints at the edge just watching. I called my dispatcher first, then 911, just describing where I was felt strange, like the storm was bending my words the way it bent light. The operator said units would check it out when they could, but conditions were bad. She told me to stay in my vehicle and not go into the trees. I didn't argue. After a few minutes, I decided to turn around. It took a lot of careful wheel work to avoid sliding into the ditch, but I managed. The whole time, I half expected someone to step out of the woods at the last second, forcing me to stop. No one did. I drove away with my hazards on, watching the mirrors like the forest might spill out onto the road behind me. Later, I heard they'd found the sedan once the storm eased, but not the driver. Not that night anyway. I never heard an ending to that story. What I still circle back to is how deliberate it all felt. The placement of the car, the open door, the still warm engine, the way those footprints didn't wander. It felt like the road had been staged to ask a question I was never meant to answer. Snowstorms don't just hide things, they erase sequence. They smooth over decisions. They wipe out endings. Sometimes all you're left with is the sense that whatever happened was close, too close, and you arrived just late enough to never really know what you almost stepped into. If you notice that the scariest moments in these stories weren't the loud ones but the quiet ones, hit the like button, subscribe so you don't miss the next scare, and tell me in the comments which moment stuck with you. And if you think Christmas is all warmth and comfort, the next video will change that. Click now to watch 4 disturbing Christmas horror stories, because sometimes the lights are on, the music is playing, and that's exactly when something's wrong. Thanks for watching. Stay alert, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next nightmare.